And it's that time again. It's time for the live CompTIA A Plus study group from ProfessorMesser.com. I'm James Messer. I'll be your host over this next hour plus of time where we're going to learn all about CompTIA A Plus information. I've got a whole set of quizzes and Q&A that we'll do back and forth. And the second half of this show, I take your phone calls. So if you go to ProfessorMesser.com/live, you'll be able to see all of the phone numbers and the information that you need to know to be able to keep up with what's going on with this. And I think I have the phone numbers here on a page of a thing. There we go. There's our live study group. And there's the phone numbers. Obviously, I won't be talking to you over the phone for about an hour, but you can at least jot them down. Put them in your very favorites list. That way I can call you even if you have me on Do Not Disturb. There is a lot of things that are going on here, and to keep track of what's going on, you can follow what we're doing. There's lots of places to go. I try to hit all of the social media places and things to go there. There is YouTube is probably the one that helps the most. Even if you can't contribute actual money to the effort of what we're doing, you're not buying a course, you're not buying one of our study guides. If you go to YouTube and you subscribe to my channel, it's remarkable how important that is, how much that helps so much there. There is also a lot that I do every day. I send out an A+ pop quiz question on Twitter, so you can, of course, follow that. That's probably the best place to get it. It's also posted on Facebook, but Facebook doesn't necessarily show you everything I post. You have to go to my page on Facebook to be able to see that. It doesn't show up in your Facebook feed. So Twitter's a great place to go. You'll get the message, the question of the day every day. Maybe I can do some more questions of the days on other topics too. I'm looking to do something like that as well. And if you're looking to save a little bit of money when you're ready to sit down and take your CompTIA exam, whether it's your A+, your Network Plus, your Security Plus, you can do all of that and save 10% if you go to ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers. And as some of you in the chat room are saying, hey, look, it's the new package. It's the new A+ package that I have with the USB key in it, which is so difficult to open from that direction. So there's a little USB key on the inside right there. It's kind of nice to have there. So when not only we've gone away from the optical media, so you will get a USB key in your package now instead of the optical media, because a lot of machines these days don't even have the optical media there. There's nowhere to even plug it in, but everybody's got a USB port. These are nifty. They've got a little click on it, so it will click open and click close. There's not even the little cap that you eventually lose 10 seconds after you plug it into your computer and wonder where it went. And that's a standard flash drive as well. So if you wanted to copy this off and save the course somewhere, it's an 8 gig flash drive. So you can use that flash drive for whatever you would like after that. And boy, doesn't it look good. Got to tell you, looks really nice. Glad all those turned out. Now, if you already have your A+ certification, you can effectively get at least some CEUs, some continuing education units, by watching this. And as we go through the study group today, I will give you a code that you can email to me, and that way I know you watched this, and I can send you an email certification back saying, yes, you must have indeed watched this, and you can send this off to CompTIA to get one CEU. Now, unfortunately, you just can't watch all the study groups and get all the CEUs that you need. They limit the number that you can get to watch by watching a live event like this, but at least it might help you somewhere along the line. Now, if you are interested in taking this course with you and getting your hands on this great USB key and package that I have, you can, of course, purchase those. They are online. So if you've watched the ones online, this is exactly the same thing that you see online, but now it's an offline version that you can take with you. You don't have to have an internet connection. I've also got MP3 files that I put with that. I have PDFs of the slides that are there. Everything is closed captioned. There's transcripts on every single one of these. So it gives you a way to really take everything that we do online and be able to use that offline. Just another way to help support what we do here. Well, let's have some fun. Let's do some Q&A on your A+ topics today. I would like to have you, if you are online, pop open a new browser and go to Socrative.com. If you have a mobile device that you would like to use instead, you can load up the mobile device app for Socrative. This is a third-party service that I use where I've put all of the questions and answers, and now you get to play along. I click a button and you'll see the question pop up on your screen depending on what's there. So if you have a Windows device, an Android device, an iOS device, doesn't matter. There's an app for all of them, or you can just pop open a new browser window if you're on a computer right now, and you can follow along by going to Socrative.com. Simply go to sign in as a student and go to the room Professor Messer, all one word. You have to spell it right, so it's there on the screen there. Professor Messer. It's one of those things. It rhymes, sort of, but it isn't spelled the same way with the same letters, is it? A bit of a challenge when we get into that. There is questions that I will be asking of you, and I've got one up there right now. You will see a question. Once you get all of this loaded and all of this running, you'll have a question on the screen that says, how long have you been studying for your A+ certification? Go to Socrative.com, go to the Professor Messer room name, and you will see something that looks a lot like this right here. So we even give you some options here to pull that from. How long have you been studying for your A+ certification? Less than 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, more than 9 months, or I've already got my A+ certification. We're here to find out what else we can do. And so some of you are already in here. You're already answering. I see the things going back and forth on my screen. So a number of you, 46% of you, almost half of you, you're just starting out. It's your first 3 months of this. You're just getting into it. Maybe it's your first semester and you're trying to get this class done for school. Maybe it's something that you're planning to take to move from one job to another. Maybe you're just trying to get into IT. This is a great way to do it. The A+ certification is great for getting into a help desk, for working on break fix, for learning more about how computers work in general. I have some people watch the course. They have no intention on actually taking the quiz, but the information you learn, not only about the hardware, the networking, the security, the operating systems, really gives you a nice foundation to build on as you go through your IT career. There is a lot of you are now getting into Socrative. You're answering this, and now we can get a pretty good idea. A number of you, 13% of you, already have your A+ certification, so there's no problem there. Now, as we're going through these questions, I'm watching the chat that's on the Professor Messer website. It's a chat that's there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we've sort of commandeered it now for this hour to be able to do the study group. So if you're on my website, professormesser.com, it's at the bottom of every page. So you can log in there with your Google Plus account, with your Facebook account. You can create a new account that's specific to this chat if you don't have any of those, and you'll be able to work with those pieces. So there is a lot that I watch during the study group. I'll see the comments going by. I try to hit some questions as long as it is associated with what we're doing here, and we'll be able to go through those pieces as well. Well, there is a lot with the A+ exam. There's a number of questions that you've sent me, and as you signed up for this study group, I've asked you to send me your questions. So I've created this Q&A today based on the topics that you have sent me. There is, on the A+ exam, of course, 2 exams you have to take to get your A+ certification. You can take these in any order. You can have any length between them that you would like. You don't take them on the same day necessarily. In fact, you probably wouldn't. You probably take one and then take the other. There's no specific time between them that you have to be, as long as you're able to take both of them before they are retired. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. The first exam, the A+ 22801, deals with PC hardware, networking, laptops, printers, and operational procedures. You'll get a maximum of 90 questions. You might get fewer than 90, depending on the type that they ask. And you are looking to get a passing score of 675. We believe that every question is worth a different number of points, and it's scaled between 100 and 900. So somewhere in there, as long as you get 675, you'll be passing. So we don't know exactly the number of questions you need to get right, but we need to get at least that many points. And of course, you don't know how many points each question is worth. So how that all happens behind the scenes. Just do the best you can, and we'll see how the questions and the answers come out in the end. There are two types of questions you might get. There's multiple choice. We'll do a lot of those today, but there are performance-based questions that you may be asked to fill in the blanks. You may be asked to do matching. You may have a command line popped up on the 802 and you have to type in a command at the command prompt as if you were on a real computer and really using it. There is a lot on the 802 that you need to know as well. The 220-802 exam is operating system, security, mobile devices, and troubleshooting. So there is a lot of content on both of these exams. These are not exams that you can simply walk into and pass, no matter what people will tell you on the internet. These are not easy exams. It's a very large breadth of information. So it takes a while to be able to go through and know all of this content. That's why I generally say you don't want to take both of these exams on the same day. Now, I'm getting a lot of questions lately about when these exams will go away. As I said, you have to take both of these before they are retired. And the whole idea of retirement means that CompTIA will be updating this exam. If you take one of these exams for your A+, and then they retire the series, you have to start over again. So nobody wants to do that. So what I'll usually do is reference people back to a posting that CompTIA did on Facebook. This was back in April, where someone asked, do you know when the A+ exam will include Windows 8? Will this be a revision to the 801, 802? Because they could just change the topics at any time and keep the exam the same. Or will this be a new test, maybe the 901 and 902? That seems to be what the progression might be. I'm an instructor trying to plan for future exam review classes, and CompTIA wrote in April they will not be adding Windows 8 to the current series of exams, which I thought was interesting. In the 700 series, they slipped in Windows 7 about a year into the exam. So CompTIA, maybe they decided that was a bad idea, because it was, and they've decided we'll wait until we do the new exam and we'll put Windows 8 on there. So it's two things. First, based on that, we probably won't see Windows 8 show up before the new exam. And secondly, we know that Windows 8 will be on the new exam. There is redevelopment of A+ that they're beginning in the later part of this year, so probably somewhere around this time frame. The new 900 series would likely not be launched until summer or fall of 2015. So we'll probably see a new version in about a year from now. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, somewhere in there. And generally in the past, CompTIA has given you a 6-month period where you can take both of the exams. There's an overlap. So when they release the new exam, they don't want to have people suddenly not able to take the old exam. You've been studying, you're ready to take the exam, and suddenly a new version shows up. Nobody likes that. So they give you an overlap a bit. So on the current exam, there's no Windows 8, but it sounds like very definitively about this time next year, you will see a new exam and you will see Windows 8 on that new exam. Some folks in the chat room were also talking about other CompTIA certifications, specifically the healthcare certification. And indeed, that is an example of an exam that will be retired completely at the end of this calendar year. So on December 31st of this year, that will be a certification that you can no longer get, the healthcare IT exam from CompTIA. They do that occasionally. They try some exams and they don't take off, or they want to fold them into something else or do something else with that content, and healthcare IT was one of those. The A+ exam, however, here to stay. That is probably their most popular exam. You're not going to see that going anywhere. So be looking for a new version of the A+ somewhere around this time of the year. Well, we've had a number of people answer that question about how long they've been studying. We can see we've got a nice curve there as we've gone through more than 9 months. There's my people, my people on D, more than 9 months, where you've been studying and studying. Maybe you've had to step away. I'm in the midst of studying for certification, and then I stopped, and then I'll probably be starting up in December again. So I'm one of these more than 9 months people. It takes me a long time. There's a lot of life that goes around that you have to deal with, and sometimes that gets in the way of getting those certifications that you're looking for. So that's one of the things that I like to be able to do as well, which is keep up with my certifications. And once I pass the certification, I'll tell you which one that is. Some folks are asking, what are you taking? What are you studying for? I'm not telling you yet. I have to pass it first. Then I'll feel better about what I'm studying. So now let's start with the questions. Let's go through, and I'm going to ask questions of you and what we're doing here. So one of the first questions that I have, let's bring this over here. Boy, I caught it right in the middle there, didn't I? There we go. Which of these tools would be the most appropriate when working with 110 blocks? Is that an engine? What is that? What's a 110 block? Not sure. Well, I have some options for you. So if you go to Socrative.com to the Professor Messer room, you will have some options available. And those options are a crimper, a multimeter, a loopback plug, or a punchdown tool. Those don't sound like an engine, so perhaps a 110 block has nothing to do with an engine. These are the types of questions, though, I like to ask. I like to give you a couple of steps in the question, so you have to first know what I'm talking about, and then you have to know how the question applies to the answers. There's one answer in these particular cases. For those of you that are calling in, just to remind you, we'll be starting our calls and taking calls in just after the top of the hour, so in about 45 minutes, I would guess. But I'll let you know when we get to that point. I don't want you holding on the line and wondering when this is ever going to end, or maybe you're calling up just to listen in, and that's fine too. There is a number of options here for crimper, multimeter, loopback plug, punchdown tool. It's one of those. That sounds awfully like a computer related thing. Doesn't have anything to do with engines, really, does it? So if you go out to the website and for Socrative, you can put in what the answer might be. And I've got a few of you that have answered. About 40 of you have answered already. I don't think this one really fooled too many people with this piece. In fact, you can see whenever there's on my screen, there's a big bar right there. I know I didn't fool anybody with the answer that was going there. It hits me in my eyes. My retinas are burning because of all the red on the screen in that single bar. So that was not really fooling very many people. Let's see what everybody answered, though. Maybe everyone's wrong. Maybe it's not you. Maybe it's me. So when we look at 6% said crimper, 8% said multimeter, 0% said loopback plug, 87% said punchdown tool for some reason. Not sure why anybody would say that. Well, first, let's talk about what these things are. This 110 block that we have available. This is what a 110 block looks like. If you go into a data center, and it's sort of weird when you see one of these for the first time because you're trying to figure out what in the world is this massive amount of wires doing on the back wall, and why does it have to be there, and why does it have to be so complicated just to connect wires together? Well, one of the things that we can do is have these punchdown blocks. There has to be this middleman between all of the computers that are out there on the floor of your building or floors of your building coming into this one central room. And now we need a way to connect those stations to the equipment that's on the inside of the room. And it's these punchdown blocks that allows us to do that. That's certainly a very common way to do that. And we don't have to have a patch panel in between. There's no intermediate pieces needed, but we do have to take the physical wires and somehow connect the physical wires from the computers on the floor to the physical wires maybe coming from a switch. That's a good thing to plug a workstation into, is to a switch. This is commonly, you'll see a 110 block. You might see a 66 block. There's different kinds of blocks. If you go through my videos, I show you what those differences are. You do have to know those two differences for the A+ exam. This is where we would plug in the Category 5, Category 6 type cables, and we use these 110 blocks. Those older 66 blocks weren't able to handle some of the higher speeds and higher frequencies we needed to send traffic over these faster modern networks. You actually use this punchdown tool, and I'll show you a picture of this next, where we are physically putting the wire across this connection, and we are punching it into these connectors. There's these tiny little pieces of sharp wire hooks inside that we are shoving these into, and they are scraping through that outside insulation and connecting to the copper that's on the inside to complete the electrical connection. And we usually will plug in many wires. And if you look carefully at this is where you'll really see this. There is a lot going on with this right here. So let me move my head out of the way. I think I just did that. Okay. So you can see behind this, you've got a bunch of wires coming into the back of it. And those wires have been already plugged in underneath this little block that's been added to the top. So when you're installing this for the first time, you actually put all the wires coming from your workstations in here and you punch those down. Then you punch a separate block on the top of them. And that separate block on the top of them is going to show, that's not where I want to be. There we go, right here. that separate block on the top goes across the top, and that's where you plug the secondary set of wires. That's where you're making the jump between what's in the back and what's in the front and connecting the two together. So you can see the wires in the back are even following the color code that's on the block. And then this odd wire that's come through, it looks like somebody has taken a single audio line, a line from perhaps somebody's doing this for a phone, and they've connected the same phone. This is probably a standard POTS line. This obviously would not be voice over IP, but taken this POTS line and connected it up to 4 separate jacks. So it's a good way to, in one single set of punches, they've now connected 4 separate outlets, and any one of those can now have a phone plugged into them, a traditional old POTS line phone, and be able to communicate out. They do exactly the same thing for network connections. So you may have another set of 110 blocks that you use for your network connections, although these days they tend to be the same exact thing. You tend to run single data line out to the workstation, put a voice over IP phone right there, connect your computer, and you don't have these separate blocks and separate punch downs that you would have to do. These punch down tools, if you're having someone use a punch down tool or you're using them, you know immediately. They're very loud because they are physically punching into these devices. I should bring one in one time. Well, if I could find mine that's around here and be able to do that. It can be a very, very tedious thing to do because you're punching down all of these separate wires, but it's trimming it and getting those wires done all in one single process. And in the chat room, the question that always comes up to this is, why wouldn't you just use RJ45 connectors and connect them up that way? And some people do use it this way. One of the nice things about the punch down is, first, you don't need RJ45 connectors. You don't need to put every wire that comes through and put a connector on, because in most environments, they don't have all of these patch cables that you're buying from monoprice.com lying around. They buy just a spool of wire. So it's very fast and very efficient just to grab one end of the spool of wire, punch it down, grab the other end of the spool of wire, maybe put an RJ45 on that and plug it in, because putting RJ45 connectors onto wires is a relatively tedious thing. When I can punch down, I can put wire, punch, and I'm off to the next one. It's very fast. And when you're dealing with 100 or even 1,000 different devices, it's very fast to use a punch down tool that way. And you're never quite certain exactly how long your cable needs to be. And for proper cable management, you would like to make it the exact size that you need. So having pre-wired RJ45s isn't always the best option anyway. Now in your home, you'll just use RJ45 cables. You don't really have a punch down. But that's why we use punch downs in those environments. It's much faster. It's much easier. If we need to make a change, we just pull the wires out, put them in somewhere else, punch them down again. Now the move's done and you're finished. In smaller environments, you might have RJ45 patch panels, and even in the CompTIA A+ objectives, you need to know about those RJ45 patch panels. So that becomes useful as well. Well, I've got more questions for you. We're just getting started. I'm already behind. Here's a question I have for you. Let's do another one. Let's go to the next one. The question is, which of these commands that I'm about to show you will copy your file and verify that the copied file matches the original? A lot of people sent me messages that said, what do we need to learn about Commandline? So I wanted to give you some questions about Commandline and be able to work with those and be able to understand some of the syntax that you would use when typing things at the command line. And I'll show you some pieces out there to be able to work with those. Well, you have some options here, of course. Your options are, you can copy /a original.txt to copy.txt. I guess our original would be the original file and the copy would be the copy of the file. Use that naming convention here to help you out. Copy /v original.txt, copy.txt, copy /y, and then copy /d. It's one of those to be able to copy the file and then verify that it's been copied. Now, the copy process is checking it as it's going along and making sure that the data is being transferred properly. But once the file gets on the other side, it would be nice to verify that the original file and the second file are really exactly the same. And if you're copying it to some media that you're going to be using for long-term backups, maybe that's a very good idea. That way you know at least when you copied the file onto that backup media, it was exactly the same as the original. And you can be assured. Now, sometimes errors occur on the device you're copying to. Maybe it's copied to a bad block. Maybe it's on a hard drive where the sector's just a little bit sketchy. It's not been marked as bad. It might be going bad. There might be a problem there, and you copy the file, but it didn't actually copy properly. So using the verify functionality can really help you. But which one do we use? Which one of these options could it possibly be to be able to work with this? And this is one of those times where knowing the command line options is really going to help you. And for copy, there's a number of different command line options to use. In this case, let's see how we have gone through this. In fact, there's probably 3 that you'll need to know for the CompTIA exam, at least 3 that people tend to use for the CompTIA exam. Copy/A will copy the file as an ASCII text file. Sometimes when you're copying a text file from one format to another, it copies in a binary format. There may be some formatting you would like to keep in that ASCII file, and this limits the copy or tells the copy command to use this and interpret it as an ASCII file. /V verifies new files are written correctly. So already you already know what the answer is from the one we just looked at. And /Y suppresses a message that you might get. If you were trying to copy this file and there was a file already there by that name that you were copying it to, it'd say, whoa, you're trying to overwrite a file. Would you like to do that? Yes or no? Well, if you have this in a batch program that's just copying over a file every day, perhaps for backups, you want to ignore that and suppress that particular question. You don't want the whole process to come to a screeching halt because the file already exists. So one of the command line prompts you can do is a /Y that says, don't ask me about that piece of it. We're going to go through this and just keep going. I know based on what I know that I'm going to overwrite that file. Don't ask me, just overwrite it and let's keep things going. Well, if we look at how we did on this question, I mentioned a lot of you knew that one. 79% of you did know it was /V. /A was not the option in this case, or /Y or /D. So for those of you that are working with these command lines, it could sometimes be a bit of a challenge. And working with command lines is one that you really have to spend some time, I think, doing hands-on. Grab a good lab, sit down with my videos, follow along with my videos, try copying some files on your computer, and see if you can get a feel for what some of the options are. And I think once you go through that muscle process of actually doing it on the keyboard, it somehow gets stuck in your memory a little bit better. So very, very useful for there. Let's say, yeah, somebody mentioning that my option here, the things that I was mentioning here is I was copying files in World of Warcraft. You'll find a lot of little hidden things that I stick into my questions from time to time on what's going on there. Let's do another question. So the next question, if I click next on Socrative, you'll be able to visit Socrative.com and be able to see that question. The question I have now is a networking question. So now, of course, one of the sections of the CompTIA exam is to know something about networking. So the question is, which of these would be a valid API-PA address? Again, I'm sort of throwing this odd term out and expecting you to know what an API-PA address is, because once you know what that is, you'll be able to answer 169.254.254.7. You'll be able to answer 172.254.1.2. You'll be able to answer 224.254.224.1 or 192.168.224.1. So there's a lot there. What do we do? What do we do with API-PA, and how do we deal with those particular addresses? It's going to be one of those. This particular answer has only, or this particular question has only one answer associated with it. So we'll be able to go through and see what the options are between those 4, but maybe it would be good to first have a look at what an API-PA address actually is. So let's have a look at these. API stands for Automatic Private IP Addressing. So already it's important to know what that abbreviation is, because if you know what the abbreviation is, you may be able to pick out the IP addresses a little bit better. We call this a link local address, which means that it is an address that can be used on a local network, but it's not routable. We can't route it out to another network. So if you have an API-PA address by itself, you won't be able to communicate to the internet unless you do some type of network address translation. That's a little bit out of scope for the A+ exam, but certainly it gives you some options. Now, there's a range of addresses, and the reason you would be assigned one of these addresses is if you've not been assigned one statically on a device, or you've tried to get one via DHCP and you weren't able to obtain an IP address via DHCP, you'll be able to obtain an address that has a number somewhere between 169.254.0.1 through 169.254.255.254. Now, actually, that's the reserved range. You'll actually be given a number between 169.254.1.0 and 169.254.254.255 because the first block and last block of 256 addresses has been reserved by the IETF. So we don't use those. So you'll see something that's still a very big range. You've got a huge number of addresses that you could put on there. This is something that is automatically assigned by your operating system. And what it does is it assigns that. It sends out an ARP command to see if anybody else has this on the local network. If it does not receive a response, then it says, yes, that's a good one. We're going to use it. Nobody else has this particular address. If you are in your computer and you go to a command prompt and you do something like an IP config, this is a good way to do it, to be able to look at these. You'll be able to see, have I been assigned an address? In fact, you can see the auto configuration IPv4 address 169.254.228.109. That's your magic numbers right there, 169.254. And if you are looking at 169.254, then you know you got an API-PA address. You look at this and go, I didn't communicate to a DHCP server. It seems to be odd that that occurred. I wonder what else I should do with that. There's quite a bit there. So let's go back to our question then, which was, which one of these would be a valid API-PA address? And you're looking for the magic numbers of 169.254. So if you're one of the people that answered A, 169.254.254.7, the 66% of you, 65% of you, absolutely correct. Those 172.254, 224, 254, and then I kind of stuck one of the 192.168.224. That is the 192.168 numbers you commonly see are private IP addresses. They are not API-PA addresses. Those are two very different things. And I think I did last month or the month before, we talked about those private IP addresses. So I added the API-PA in there just to make sure we knew what options would be available. All right, that was a good question. We went through that. Well, one of the things I also want to tell you, we were talking earlier about the A+ certification exam and having the Professor Messer website, and I asked you to go to YouTube and subscribe. There's also other ways that you can support the website for all of the CompTIA exams, for all of these exams on my site that I have. I also have effectively course notes. I've taken all of the notes and things from my exam and I put them into these study guides. So this is a great way to not only support the site and keep things going here at Professor Messer, but it also gets a really nice study guide. I took all of the things from all of my videos. I grabbed everything I could find. Let's see if I can show you an example. Here's the two study guides for 801 and 802. I try to take everything from my videos, all the graphics, all of the images, all of the interfaces. Here's the 802. So you've got information about operating systems. Here's your command line tools down the side. You've got information on the system tools and how they're used. I tried to fit everything I could into these study guides so that you'd have something you could take with you. And it's nice. It's immediately downloadable. It's a PDF file. So once you buy it, it's yours and you can download it right from the website from your member directory. So it's something that's delivered to you immediately. And it's a PDF file. It's unprotected as well. You can put this on all of your devices. As long as you're the only one using it, you're licensed to put it wherever you'd like. You can print it out if you'd like to. And you can do anything you want. It's your PDF to do as you wish. There's no protection there or anything you have to deal with. So it's another way to help keep things going. Our hosting at the Professor Messer website, we are up to almost 700,000 videos viewed in a month, 21 million so far just on YouTube. So there's a lot of money that is spent just on the hosting services. It's surprising. And when you help contribute to the site by buying one of these study guides, it goes a long way. And I want to thank everyone who's purchased these. It really helps a lot. If you want to learn more about those, you can see more at professormesser.com/A+SG. Well, let's go back to our question, shall we? I've got more for you. We're not anywhere close to being done with this. So the question I have, let's go to our next in Socrative and go to the Professor Messer room, and you'll be able to see the question, which says, you've connected a new wireless mouse and a keyboard combo. You know, those where you get both the keyboard and the wireless mouse at the same time and you plug it in. But the installation program isn't recognizing the new USB wireless transceiver. You have to plug in a USB wireless dongle, a little connector, a transceiver into a USB interface to be able to have these wireless devices connect to and communicate to your computer. So which of these Windows utilities would be the best choice for determining the status of the new hardware? one of these is going to be a good one to use. So here are some options that you would have available then. These are good 220-802 questions. So your operating system tools. So would this be your event log? Would it be your device manager? Would it be a control panel / keyboard? There's a keyboard section in there. Or would it be the driver manager? Now, some of these give you similar information. Some of these allow you to hop around to other devices. But when you look at an A+ exam question, they're going to want the best possible answer. In fact, in the question, they will do generally what I did here. Which of these utilities would be the best choice for determining the status of the new hardware? Some people feel that that's a trick question in a way, but I assure you, when you look at the answers on the exam, the correct answer will come right to the top. You will see it there. If you know what you're doing, you will see the correct answer in that list. There is no vague idea between a couple of specific questions on there. So you really have to think about, what are they asking for? What do they want me to do? And to answer this question, of course, you go out to Socrative.com to the Professor Messer room, and you'll be able to answer this. This is another one of those. I try to put them in here as people want to know what should I use in certain situations. Sometimes I catch you, but in this case, I'm not sure. There's another retina burner right in front of me there. I don't think I really fooled too many people with that one either. Well, let's see what folks really came up with. And if we look at the answers, nobody said event log. Gosh, why wouldn't I look at the event log? Because there were no events. That's why. That's a horrible place to go to solve this particular kind of problem. The device manager, 92% of you, I think you might have gotten this one, were absolutely correct. It's your device manager. You're trying to manage the devices on your computer and what they're doing. That's exactly where you want to be able to go and what you want to be able to look at. A control panel keyboard would not give you the information. Your keyboard is not connected yet, so that becomes a very difficult way to do that. And driver manager, 6%. No, it's not quite driver manager. There's not a driver manager. There is no app called driver manager, unfortunately. In fact, the app that shows you the drivers is the device manager. So that's where you want to go. And I can see the answers that you're putting in interactively on the screen. So all you have to do is click it on your screen, and they will interactively show up here. I don't think you have to push anything on your side to be able to do that. There is a number of pieces in the device manager. It's a great place to go if you're having a problem with anything where you're not seeing a remote drive, a drive that you've plugged in USB. Maybe it's the keyboard and mouse aren't working properly. Maybe your network connection didn't start up properly. You want to get more information about it. Or somebody's asking, what version of driver are you running for your video card, for your network card? You can see a lot of information there. The operating system itself has no idea how to talk to these thousands and thousands and thousands of different kinds of hardware that's out there in the world. So you have to have a driver for that. It's the middleman that has the hardware talking to the operating system. So it's a very important piece of the operating system, and they're very specific to the type of hardware and the operating system you're running. You can't generally take an XP driver and use it in Windows 7. You have to get a driver for Windows 7. It has to be for that specific piece of hardware that you're working with. You can't put a generic video driver on your computer and expect it to use the specific capabilities of your new video card. You have to get a very specific piece, and that's why whenever you talk to tech support, one of the first things they say is, have you updated the drivers? Because we came out with new drivers, especially for video cards. You're updating drivers quite a bit because there's so many bug fixes in those newer drivers that can be resolved. You can also get to the drivers through computer management. If you type in DEV mgmt.msc at the command line, you can even pop over to the computer management, and inside of computer management is the option to view the device manager. So there's a couple steps you can go through to be able to do that. And again, somebody in the chat room said, that sounds like the hardware abstraction layer, the HAL. The HAL isn't used anymore in Windows 7. I guess in XP, that would apply, sure, to have that abstraction layer. But the concept is the same. You have this separation between operating system and hardware, and it's an important one to be able to do that and be able to use it. There is quite a bit that, and as they say in the chat room, just reboot. What do you need device manager for? Just reboot your computer. You'll be just fine. Now, for those of you that have been watching this and wanting to get credit for your CompTIA A+ certification continuing education units, you simply, at this point, you can go to the top of the Professor Messer website to contact us. You can open that up and send me a note, and in that, somewhere needs to be the words device manager I'll know what you're asking about, and I'll be able to send you an email certification back sometime over this next week that will say, yes, you did indeed attend this live and watch this event. So that's an important one to keep in mind. Let's do another question. So I've got another question here. Which one of these? So, I love the operating system questions. A lot of you asked about operating systems and what features are available or capable in different operating systems. This is a good one to do. So, which of these would not meet the minimum requirements for Windows 7 x64? And again, you have to know what Windows 7 x64 is, being able to do that. You've got a lot of different options here. So, which would not meet the minimum requirements? 20 gig of free disk space, 1 gig of RAM, DirectX graphics device with a WDDM 1.0 or higher, or a 1 gigahertz processor. Which of these would not meet the minimum requirements? Now you have to go back in your head and go, okay, what is minimum requirements for Windows 7? And some people in the chat room are going, what are we talking about Windows XP for? That Windows XP is gone already, isn't it? Except there's still millions and millions and millions of people still using it. So the CompTIA exam is here to give you the information you need to perform your day-to-day functions working with computers. And you're going to run into one of these computers still running Windows XP, probably for quite a very long time from now. Obviously, you need to know other operating systems as well, and I would expect probably a year from now when that update comes out, we probably won't see Windows XP anymore. So if you go to the Socrative page, you'll be able to answer the questions with this one as well. Okay, we mixed this one up a little bit. We're all over the place with this one. What is it? Some of you are Googling, no answering in the chat room. Don't do that. So you want to be able to think about this. 20 gig of free disk space, 1 gig of RAM. Let's see, 9% said 20 gig of disk space is the problem. 61% said you're going to need more than a gig of RAM. 15% said the DirectX graphics device is not going to be enough for Windows 7. And 18% said, no, you're going to need more, I guess, than a 1 gigahertz processor to be able to do that. Pretty useful to have that capability there. So if we look at what the options are for Windows 7, which we should be able to piece this out. Now, the important part of this particular question is minimum requirements for Windows 7 x64. That is the 64-bit version of Windows 7. This is not the 32-bit version. There are different requirements for both. So that might trip you up. If we look at the two different requirements, on the left I have the requirements for the 32-bit version, that's the x86 version, and the 64-bit version, the x64. Both require a 1 gigahertz processor. The free disk space for 32-bit is 16 gig and 20 gig for Windows 7, so that wasn't it. A DirectX 9 graphics device with WDDM 1.0 or higher is needed on both of these. The real differentiation right here. You need a gig of RAM as a minimum requirement for the 32-bit version, and 2 gig of RAM is your minimum requirement for the 64-bit version. So if we go back and look at the options that we had, indeed, 1 gig of RAM would not be enough for the 64-bit version of Windows 7. So if you answered the letter B, you would be absolutely correct there. So good job at getting those. You were able to pull those out just fine. Let's do another question. Let's keep this party going. Let's see, we're up to question 7. I've got quite a few more questions to go before we're done. There's a lot here. So the question I have next deals with the BIOS. So we're at the 220-801 exam and being able to do that. So we have features available in the BIOS. So which of these would not be commonly found in a BIOS? And I want you to choose 2 in this particular option. So would you not find hardware diagnostics? Here we go. Disabling the USB port, a disk partitioning option, or date and time setting. So we're talking about what's commonly found in a BIOS when you turn it on. Some of these might be in a BIOS. They might not be in a BIOS. They might not be commonly found in a BIOS. You have to know what you would commonly find across many different types of a BIOS. Well, I guess you have to know what a BIOS is to start with, right? It's another one of those second steps to be able to do that and work with that. And I think that's where I really get into using the hands-on again and being able to work with it. That's where I really like the capabilities of using a virtual machine, being able to do and use somebody else's computer or third system, because a BIOS isn't something you necessarily want to go in and change a lot of things around with. That's very common to see that. So if we look at the different options available, we should be able to go to Socrative.com and answer one of those. Again, no answering in the chat room. Don't say anything out loud there. No Googling. What are you doing Googling with those pieces? Well, let's see what the options are then to be able to do that. Let's have in there. And again, we're talking about the most common things to find in a BIOS. Of course, there are things you aren't commonly finding in a BIOS. And in this particular case, we had 32% said hardware diagnostics, 10% said disable the USB port, 49% said disk partitioning options, and 9% said the date and time settings. So the things that you would not commonly find in a BIOS, you guys were right on the money. If we take the two that had the most percentages associated with them, hardware diagnostics is something you sometimes will find in a BIOS, especially the newer ones these days, but it's not common. Commonly, you'll see the disabling of the USB port and the date and time settings. Disk partitioning options almost never found in the BIOS of a computer, sometimes in the BIOS of a hard drive controller. That's pretty unusual as well. So if you answered that you don't commonly see hardware diagnostics and you don't commonly see disk partitioning, then you would have gotten that absolutely correct when you start working with those. The BIOS is the basic input-output system. That's where you have the fundamental integration of hardware to your operating system itself. Every computer has some type of BIOS associated with it. And as they said in the chat room, there's even newer styles of BIOS that are out there. I would imagine the UEFI BIOS is one that you will see talked about in the next version of the A+ exam. That's what all the new motherboards have on them. It's what the new operating systems take advantage of. The current the fundamental BIOS is the one that's currently on the A+ exam. You don't have to know much about that as well to get it going. So good job on answering the questions with those. Let's do another one. I got lots of questions here. Let's keep going through these, and let's have it pop up on your screen. There we go. What type of laptop display technology provides a fast refresh rate with relatively little power and doesn't require a backlight? So I've put together a number of different things that you can do with that to try to determine what's there. You have to go through these different options because the options I have for you are OLED, LCD, CRT, and LED. So you've got to determine from all of those what the options might be. There's quite a bit that you would go through in working with these display technologies. If you've had to buy a new display recently, there's a ton of options available, a lot of different things that you need to look for, not only in the technical specifications, but the fundamental build of the display itself. How's it put together? What technology does it use? Does it use one of these? And if it does use one of these, which one has the fast refresh rates, relatively little power, and doesn't require a backlight? You can go to our website that we've got these questions and answers on, thesocrative.com. Go to the Professor Messer room name, and you'll be able to answer this as well. And if you did, you'll be able to see a lot of people said OLED, 59%, but a good chunk of 28% people said LED. There's also 7% that said LCD and 5% that said CRT. Well, the keys with this question really dealt with fast refresh rates, which these days tend to be across the board. Everything is pretty fast with refresh rates on all of the technology, so that's very general. Relatively little power. I guess the relative part's important because we want to compare it against all of those technologies. So we could start thinking about what it might be, and it does not require a backlight. And that really is your key because one of these technologies requires a backlight. And if we look at the differences between, for instance, an LED and an OLED, an LED display is effectively a backlit LCD display. That's what it is. We call them LED displays because it's an LED light behind it, but it's an LCD display. That's the technology in use. The LED happens to be the light that's behind it. Previous to the LEDs, we had effectively fluorescent lights that were in the back displaying light between. And on this LCD display, you have to have a backlight. There's no way around it. You're not able to see it unless you have a backlight there as well. You've also got a number of different things that you have to look at on these devices. One of the nice things about the OLED displays, and we're seeing more and more of these, is that the OLED display is one that creates light itself whenever you provide it with a little bit of power, a little bit of electric current. And now it has its own, it's effectively glows. It's its own light source. It doesn't require a backlight. So there's effectively an entire set of power and cost that you don't have to apply to that display, because you don't need a backlight. You don't need the LEDs. There's not a separate system to light it. You just need something very, very simple to be able to view that as it's coming through. And you're seeing those more on mobile devices because they are relatively expensive these days, because we have to grow the manufacturing bigger. And eventually we may grow it into a size that makes sense, but it's so inexpensive for our larger televisions to be these LED backlit that it's going to take a while before we see OLED really, really take off, if it does at all. Those are the things. We never know what type of display technology is going to be next, and being able to work with those. Well, we've done a lot today with command lines and working with command line options. And some of the things that we've been working on have been like the format command, where we needed to understand what the option was in the format command to be able to use it. One of the things that I recommended is that you be able to maybe do some hands-on work. But you may be concerned about doing anything hands-on that's going to be changing something that's on your computer. You don't want to break anything in your operating system, because this is the computer you use all the time. So one of the things I recommend is these GTS learning labs that are all completely online. This is called Freestyle, and you can find out more about this at professormesser.com/freestyle labs. These are labs that are all online. They are effectively virtual labs, completely set up and ready for you, that you can run from your browser. So I'm in my Firefox browser. I don't have to even install additional software to be able to do this. It uses the built-in capabilities. I can do introducing Windows 7, system administration, user account management, disk management. One of these things is using command line disk utilities. Let's launch that one. And what it's going to launch is a lab on the right side here, and I can make that bigger or put it in another window or view it differently if you don't like the size of it. But it steps you through the entire process of using this. On the left side of the screen are the actual machines. So you can go to each one of these machines, and I'm going to power them on. Click. I'm going to use this as HTML5, so I don't have to install Java or deal with any of that. I'm just going to go to all of these systems and power them up. So behind the scenes, it really is starting up in a completely self-contained virtual device. You don't have to have any devices in your network. You don't have to have anything local you don't have to buy separate machines to be able to touch them. You don't have to install any operating systems or then find labs somewhere else. You can simply use these machines that are always available, always online. And what's nice is we're connecting to them through this remote communication. Let me show you what I mean. This Windows 7 device just started up, and if I click on it, it established a connection, and now I'm using this Windows 7 machine. This is a fully blown Windows 7 device, so I can connect. There's my start menu. Here's my control panel. It's a Windows 7 device, and I didn't have to have any licensing. I didn't have to install anything. I didn't have to do any pieces of it. Now I can step through the lab and perform the different steps that they have available to make this work. They've already set up the domain controllers. They've already set up XP devices. It's all here. And you can find out more about this and get 1 hour absolutely free to try this yourself at the Freestyle webpage. There at Freestyle Labs, professormesser.com/freestyle labs. Special pricing too. For $99 a year, you'll not only get access to this, but you'll also get the complete Freestyle book that normally you'd buy from Amazon for, I think, at least $35. And then it also has some sample tests that you can go through as well. So all of that in one single place. Find out more about that at professormesser.com/freestyle labs. Let's do something more with our questions. We've got more questions to go through. I've got a lot more questions to go through. Let's see how much we can get through today. I'd like to see if we can get through at least the last few of these. I don't want to go too long for the folks that have tuned in for the first hour. So our first question, if I have this question go forward in your computer, there we go. It is, which of these operating systems can be upgraded directly to Windows 7 Professional with an in-place upgrade? So I'm going to give you some options about what those might be, what those options might be. But again, you need to parse out these questions to really understand them. I'm upgrading. I'm going to Windows 7 Professional and I'm doing an in-place upgrade. So you have to know what an in-place upgrade is, and perhaps even know in your mind what other options there might be with an in-place upgrade. So some of the options available to you: can we do this with Windows XP Professional? Can I upgrade Windows Vista Business directly to Windows 7 Professional? Can I upgrade Windows Vista Enterprise? Can I upgrade Windows XP Professional x64 using the in-place upgrade? So these are the things that you'll be asked. There's a whole section on the CompTIA exam dealing with operating systems, minimum requirements, and what's required to upgrade them. Because that's something you do very commonly in a large environment, is you're going from Windows XP, especially these days, Windows XP, you're probably wanting to get to a newer operating system. So what are your options? How do you perform that upgrade? How do you make sure that your user's data is safe when you perform the upgrade? There's a lot of different ways you can do it, so you need to understand what your options are and what those different things that you need to look out for might be. So have a look at those. You can, of course, no answering in the chat room, but you can go certainly to the page that has these on there to be able to understand what the options might be. So this is where we get into understanding more about Windows XP and some of those options that might be available. This is a really good example of how Windows XP is still viable as something to learn for the A+ exam, because you're going to have a lot of people that are going to need to upgrade. Many already have, and there's certainly millions more that need to as well. Let's see how you answered. So which of these operating systems can be upgraded directly to Windows 7? We're all over the place. Finally, I've got somewhere where we aren't quite sure exactly what the answer might be. Windows XP Professional, 12% said that. Vista Business, 42% said Vista Business. So that one's in the lead, I guess. We might want to look at that one. Windows Vista Enterprise, close behind with 30%. And 15% said Windows XP Professional x64. Well, this is where it gets pretty interesting, because you can't go in an in-place upgrade. In-place upgrade, by the way, is when you take the Windows 7 disk that you get, in this case, Windows 7 Professional, you put it on your computer when it's still running, and you say, please upgrade me. That you're upgrading everything in place. You're not copying anything off. You're not wiping the device and installing fresh. You're doing it in place. And there is no upgrade path between Windows XP to Windows 7 as a single step on an in-place upgrade. You can't do it. You can't plug in any Windows 7 into an XP device and have it upgrade that device. You have to first go to Windows Vista, then you could go to Windows 7. It would have to be a two-step process if you were really stuck into doing an in-place upgrade. And if you look at the different path of these, although it's a relatively big bunch of things here, one of the things that's important to keep in mind is when you're upgrading from a particular version, you can go to a version that is very similar. So if I'm going to a Windows 7, in our case, we're going to a Windows 7 Professional to be able to do this. The only thing I can really use as an in-place upgrade is Windows Vista Business. I can't go to a different version of Windows. I tend to have to go from like to like. So I can go from Windows Vista Home Premium to Windows 7 Home Premium. I can go to Windows Vista Home Basic to another Windows 7 Home Basic. That one also lets me install the Home Premium, but you can see it kind of follows that particular path all the way through. And if I'm going to Windows 7 Professional, I have to have the Vista Professional version, which they called at the time Windows Vista Business. So if you're one of the folks that answered Windows Vista Business, the 39% of you, absolutely correct. You know your upgrade paths and how to do that with an in-place upgrade. Well done. There's quite a bit that you would need to know with those pieces. Let's do another question. I think there's a couple left in here that we can get through. So let's do another one. This one is going to ask specifically about the make of these different things that we use, which is, in fact, I could probably put this up on the screen a little bigger so you can see it. Which of these would you commonly find in the first sector of a storage device? One of these is going to be in the first sector of a storage device, at least commonly. Again, that word, commonly found. So would there be different things in the first sector of a storage device? I wonder. You got some different options available, though. Would it be the bootloader? Would it be the BIOS? Would it be the registry? Would it be the master boot record? It's going to be one of those. I'm only looking for one answer here. I want to know what is commonly found in the first sector of that storage device: bootloader, BIOS, registry, or a master boot record. It's got to be one of them, right? Now we need to do also perhaps a type of scratching off the things that aren't here. Calculatus, eliminatus. Let's get rid of and eliminate those things that are there. Get rid of the pieces that we know aren't correct, and at least we'll have a better chance of knowing what could be correct with these particular pieces of it. Quite a bit that's there and available for you. If you go to Socrative.com, you can go to the Professor Messer room and follow along with us. If you happen to tune in late, you'll be able to do that. Pop open a new window. There's also apps you can download. Make sure you download the student app and follow along in this particular case and go to the Professor Messer room. So we look at these four. We've got some different options available. Let's see how we've done. We had about 60 people that have given us some options here, and we're a little torn. Most of us have said 79% said master boot record, although 16% said bootloader. And the folks that said BIOS and registry, very few people said that. In fact, those would not be the correct answers. But I wonder if bootloader, even though 15% said that, would it be bootloader? Well, it wouldn't. It would be master boot record. So if you chose D, you'd be absolutely correct. It is the master boot record. It is the thing that you most commonly find in that first sector of the drive. First sector is not very big. There are some cases where you can have a bootloader in the first part of the disk. May not necessarily fit into the first sector, but certainly there are some options there for bootloaders. The thing that is most common, however, is absolutely the master boot record. This is the first sector of the drive, most commonly very small amount of space, 512 bytes. So 512 characters in size, if you want to think about it that way. Has primary partition information, disk signature, and directions on where should I go to start up the operating system. I have no idea what I'm doing here. Where's the operating system on this disk, and what should I do? And it generally points you to the next place you go to get the operating system up and running in that computer. So for those of you that answered D, you would have been absolutely correct with that particular answer. One of the things that was changed or updated in the A+ certification exam was a series of machines and the functions available to them. So when these days we're not just buying a computer just to browse, just to play games, we also buy them for a lot of different pieces as well, different sizes of computers that can do different things in our homes. So one of the questions that I have for you is, which three of these characteristics would be the most important for a home theater PC? You go to Socrative.com, be able to answer that particular question once I show it to you on the screen. There we go. Which three of these characteristics would be most important? And I've given you quite a number of characteristics here. So for home theater, do I need HDMI output, high-end cooling, a built-in tuner, a small form factor, a maximum amount of installed memory, or a gigabit NIC? Which one of these are going to be, or which three of these are going to be the most important? So again, now you have to start making decisions about which of these would be most important. Maybe all of them would be nice to have, but for something as specific as a home theater PC, we need three of these. And again, if you know what the differences are between these different machines, because the CompTIA exam asks you about CAD/CAM graphics devices, it asks you about doing video editing, it asks you about small systems and large systems, and this one is specifically asking about home theater PC. There's some characteristics you have to be able to find that in a home theater PC. For those of you following along, go to Socrative.com, go to the Professor Messer page, and we're going to see which three things are really going to be the top three on our list. And this is, now we got a mix of different things on the screen and what we're going to look at through here. Make sure you go through and consider what's important for a home theater device. We need to be able to differentiate between the things that are most important and the things that maybe just aren't as important on a home theater device. So let's see what the options are. We've got a number of you that have, over 60 have said this, and I think most of you are right on the money with this. I think 35% of you said you need HDMI output, and I think for a home theater computer, you would be absolutely correct with that piece. High-end cooling, I think for home theater, we're not talking about something that has a lot of CPU cycles associated with it, really just doing video type work, so maybe not high-end cooling. A built-in tuner, definitely 23 of you said, yeah, I'm going to need a built-in tuner with that. It's a home theater device. Of course, I'm going to need a tuner. Small form factor is really important on a home theater device, so I think that one would apply. Maximum installed RAM. These days, you don't need a ton of memory to be able to do home theater type functionality. And gigabit NIC, although useful, not really required for bandwidths, even for something like high definition. You don't need a lot of bandwidth to be able to do that. Even a 100 megabit NIC inside of your home for home theater would really work just fine for streaming video on that piece. So if you answered HDMI output, built-in tuner, and a small form factor, you would be right, because that's what you need for a home theater PC. You need something with good audio. You need something with good video. So you're going to need HDMI. It's going to go next to your television, so it needs to be relatively small, nice small form factor. You don't want to have a big monster computer next to your television, and you will need a TV tuner to at least connect to cable and perhaps get a high definition off the air, be able to record that information and have it there. Wow. So very short period of time. We've gone through a lot of questions for the A+ exam. There's a number of things that folks have asked me about, and I get really a lot of questions every month about where do I find what I need to know for the exam. And I say this every time, and it's incredibly important. Go to the objectives and download them from CompTIA. They tell you exactly what you need to know for the exam. If you go to professormesser.com/objectives, it'll go right there, or just go to the Google and type in CompTIA exam objectives. It will take you right to the page. Use this as your study list. It's a checkbox. You can go down the entire list and know if you're ready to take the exam, and you'll know what topics specifically will be asked of you. So when people ask, hey, is Windows 8 on the exam? You can go to the exam objectives and it will tell you. And as of this week, Windows 8 is not on the exam because I downloaded the exam objectives this week and made sure that I had the one that was up to date. CompTIA has the ability to change these at any time. They don't generally do that. In fact, with the 220-800 series, they have not changed it for 2 years. So they've really kept it right. When they released it, they kept these specific objectives there and have not changed them, which is great for people like you and me that are constantly looking at this material and trying to study for these exams and have it available. You want to be sure you have those pieces there. So keep that in mind. Well, we've come to the end of our hour. Really went over a little bit this time, but I want to ask one last question of you, which is, what would you like to cover next time? There's a lot of contents that we can go through and cover in this 1 hour. Really don't cover a lot of content. I have to really find the most popular things, and this is one way that I can get feedback from you on what topics that you would like to cover for the next one. I'm just going to leave this up for the next hour. So if you're someone who's coming in and you'd like to at least leave your comments, and it's a free form typing it in, you can type in anything you'd like into that, and I'll be able to know. So someone said troubleshooting. I want to do more with troubleshooting. So I'll be able to do something with that on the next exam. If I can get more people interested in these topics, I'll know that I can present them for you as well. There's a number of things that as we finish up here, I want to make you aware of. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter to get that question every day on the Twitter. YouTube also has all of my videos that I do. I put them out there, and if you subscribe to my channel on YouTube, it really provides us with an amazing amount of resources. It's hard to explain exactly all of the things that happen behind the scenes, but I have calls with the folks at Google and their YouTube piece. Now, I have one-to-one meetings, and the only way I'm able to have those is from your support. It's remarkable. It's sort of a third-party way of making sure that I'm able to provide you with more content, is to have you subscribe to that channel. So even if you can't buy anything, some folks in the chat room said, I wish I could buy the study guides, but that's okay. Don't even have to do that. Go straight to YouTube, subscribe to the channel. That's just as good in my mind. It helps me out quite a bit. Those reference guides I mentioned, by the way, which make great study materials, you can find at professormesser.com/A+SG. Again, my thanks to GTS Learning for sponsoring and giving you a great price, a special Professor Messer price on the Freestyle Labs. You only get that special price if you go to this particular link. If you go to the GTS page, it costs more. So go to professormesser.com/freestyle labs and try your free hour of that. I tend to do one of these every month. I certainly have done the A+ every month for a while. This is the only month I'm not going to be doing a Network Plus study group, a live study group. I'm going to miss it this month, and you'll know why next month. So that's all I'll tell you is I'll leave that one there as a little teaser for next time to try to figure out why in the world is he not having a Network Plus this month. And that brings us to the end of our first hour. If you're watching us live, stick around for a second hour. I'm going to take your phone calls. And if you're leaving us or you're watching this, I appreciate you joining us. Feel free to join us next time on the Professor Messer A+ Study Group. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.